Okay, so we're streaming live on YouTube and the meeting is recording, so over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks very much. Good morning and welcome to this virtual meeting of the Poverty Working Panel on Monday, 31st of January 2022. I am your Chair, Councillor Megan Armstrong. I would also like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via the live stream. Based on a decision of the Council to continue virtual meetings until 11th of May 2022, I would like to remind both members and public attending or watching that this Council has delegated much of its decision-taking power to our senior officers. The meeting can be viewed live online and will be recorded. Please bear this in mind throughout the meeting. Therefore, may I remind colleagues to be careful with their language and that the Code of Conduct applies throughout our meeting. We reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant disrupting the meeting by whatever means. As this meeting is dependent on internet connection and a power supply, in the event of a break in the internet connection or a power cut, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. If we are not able to reconnect after 15 minutes, this meeting will be adjourned and reconvened at a later date. Please check the committee page on our website for further details. Could colleagues please ensure your microphone is muted when you are not speaking? This will help avoid any disturbance from background noise. Could you also keep your points short and not interrupt when someone else is speaking? Should you wish to comment, please raise your electronic hand and wait to be called. All councillors have been sent the agenda for today's meeting, and it can also be viewed on the website at www.eastdevon.gov.uk. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of the members of the working panel. Can you please now unmute your microphone, and when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. When you have confirmed you're present, please mute your microphone again. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Allen.
Yes, I'm here, Sarah.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor De Sarum.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vixen.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Whibley. Councillor Whibley? No. Thank you. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you. I can confirm we are quorate today. So, agenda item 1, public speaking. I don't believe there are any members of the public registered to speak. Is that correct, Sarah?
Yes, that's correct. There are none.
Okay, thank you. And apologies. Could you tell us, please, apologies have been received from who? Thank you.
Yes, so we have apologies from Councillor Woodward, Councillor Hawkins and Councillor Jarvis.
Okay, right, lovely. Thank you very much. So, agenda items, have we got any apologies from non-members?
No, we don't.
No, okay, thank you. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Declarations of interest will be noted by raising your electronic hand. Please state your declaration, including which agenda item your declaration relates to. If it is a personal or a prejudicial declaration, and state what exactly the interest is, please. I'm just looking at hands. I can't see any hands. Can you, Sarah?
No, no hands.
No, so no declarations. Thank you. Agenda item 4, minutes of the previous meeting held on 22nd of November 2021. The draft minutes of the previous meeting held on 22nd November 21 have been circulated. If any members have any comments on the minutes, please please raise your electronic hand. If there are no electronic hands raised, I will take it that you are happy to receive and accept the minutes. Councillor De Sarum, I believe.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you. Yes, I just wanted under item 15. There was discussion with Libby. It said that Libby Jarrett would liaise with Team Devon to coordinate awareness and advice for residents about the problems associated with using loan sharks. And I know that was something that Councillor Chapman had raised and felt it was very important about around the Christmas time period. And I wonder if elsewhere in this meeting we could have a brief update on that, because I know it was Councillor Chapman raised it and felt it was a very significant thing that the panel could do. I appreciate it's not a dispute about the minutes. It's merely a request for a very brief update. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. Yes, I've got that down on my notes as well, believe it or not. And we will be, Sharon will be speaking shortly, and I'm not sure whether, is Libby in the meeting? I'm just looking to see. Yeah, Libby's here as well. So one or other of them will be able to give an update, sure on. Thank you for that. Do you want to leave it for now, Libby, and we'll take it up later on, or did you want to say anything now? Just wondering.
Sorry. Good morning, Chair and members. I've got a terrible cough, so I would rather not do an update now. That's all right. But if I can, either do it by email or if Sharon can come off. Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We've got Joe Garfoot. I think you have your hand up, please.
Morning, Megan. Just a very brief update. In the housing update last time, I said that we were expecting to hear about the bid to the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund before Christmas. We've since had an update from them that there is somewhat slippage in the system, so we're likely not to hear now until the end of February. So
okay, thank you for that update. Thank you. Okay. So we'll wait with bated breath for the end of February. Thank you. So I can't see any more hands raised. So we'll go on to the next item, which is item 5, an update on the Household Support Fund from Sharon Church, Benefits Manager. Following the initial briefing on this item by Libby Jarrett at the last meeting, I'll now invite Sharon to give her update on the Household Support Fund. So thank you very much, Sharon. If you'd like to carry on, thank you.
Hi, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I want to give a brief update on usage of the Household Support Fund. The figures that I've got are up to date as of the 27th of January. There is quite a few, so I will forward them on to be sent out afterwards, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're currently around 60% of the way through our budget. We've currently spent 84,820. If demand stays as it is, we're likely to get to the middle, if not through to the end of March. But that does depend on how demand goes over the next few months. The spend in December, it was high at £44,440, but we did expect that due to it being Christmas. Spend in January dropped down to currently to £20,833, which was nearer the spend, or a bit higher than the spend for November when we started. We've had 798 applications, 467 of those, 58% have been given an award. However, we've also been making use of the funds available elsewhere that we can tap into, such as Citizens Advice Energy Relief Scheme for top-up of meters. We've been food banks, especially over Christmas, some of them are providing Christmas dinners and extra food over Christmas period. So we have been accessing other funds as well as the Household Support Fund to support residents. Our spend on food is the highest of the 5 categories at £54,765. That's just under 65%. £21,363, so 25% has been used for energy and water, and the further 10% has gone on wider essentials, so essentials linked to energy and water and housing costs. In terms of where the applications have come from, there has been a small drop in the percentage of applications coming from households with a disability. That was previously 41% when we gave an update at November's panel, and that's now just under 37%. And the percentage of carers in the household applying, that's remained steady at about 20% compared to 21% in November. We've also had 26 applications from residents of pensionable age and 11 applications from previous serving members of the armed forces. Single parents are now our highest group of residents applying for help. We had 195 applications from that group, and then it's 139 applications from single people with no children, so they're our second highest group of applying. Just under 59% of successful applications have been made to households with children, down slightly on November's figure of 63%. 80 applications came from couples with children in the household, and 23 from couples with no children. And in terms of housing status, we've had 244 renting privately, 236 council tenants, 230 were housing associations tenants, and 72 applications came from homeowners and 16 from homeless residents. So we can kind of see that most residents are still in the cheapest accommodation available, but they are still struggling financially. Of the figures we've so far got, almost 83% have come from those who are unemployed, which is different to November when 44% came from those in employment. That's now nearer to the 16%. But there's a close split for workers. So we've got 24 applications have come from self-employed and 23 each from full-time and part-time employed people in employment. We've identified around about 130 cases that need further work from the financial resilience team. And the majority of those who applied said that the reason they were coming to us for help was because they were unable to afford food and energy. But as we've kind of been learning, that initial reason for people approaching us for help, it's often not the real cause of their hardship. It's more of a symptom of everything that's been going on. So we are continuing to work with communications on regular press releases and to promote the fund and encourage residents to apply. And we've also been having regular meetings with Devon County Council on the usage of the fund and discussions with them over the wider poverty issues and what's going to happen after the fund closes at the end of March and across Devon. So work's still going on there. And we were also asked to attend a feedback session with the DWP policy team last week to share our learning and ideas. So we actually had a chance to let them know about the work we were doing and what we would like to see beyond March if further funding is going to be granted. So we're waiting to hear about that. And lastly, we are still working on our poverty dashboard and collecting lots of data, and we are hoping that we'll be in a position to share that with the panel in March. So that's kind of it for my update. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, can I just, before I open it up to other questions, a couple of things I'd just like to ask. Well, it's just generally about the rising cost of living and the inflation and everything else that's going on at the moment. And it just, I suppose it just concerns me that at the end of March, we're still not sure what's going to happen financially, whether you're going to get any more. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with that. But you mentioned about the press release. Did you notice when the press release went out to sort of encourage people to apply? Did you notice whether there was any greater input into the applications or not?
Yeah, they did increase.
Good.
So when we do the press releases, it does drive an increase in applications. Not a vast increase, but it does. It does
just reminds people.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. There's something I want to mention later on as well, but I'll open up for questions at the minute. So thank you very much, Sharon, for that update. So if I could please invite, first of all, non-members to speak by raising your hand. I can't see any non-members wanting to speak at the moment. So I think the first one is probably Councillor Rickson. Marianne, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed that you said in your presentation that a lot of people come forward ostensibly to ask for help with energy and food costs, but often there are other underlying reasons. Is this to do with mental health or other issues that are more concerning too?
Yeah, there's lots of underlying reasons. So we are working on identifying those on our dashboard as we do that further work, but they can be anything. We can have mental health, life chances, people being able to get good jobs when they've not done so well at school, or going to higher paid employment, so they might have lower skills. That there's a vast array of reasons, underlying reasons why people are kind of suffering. So our team are trying to identify those and get them to the right support to support them, to help them out of poverty, really.
That's all right, Marianne?
Yeah, could I just follow up with, am I right in assuming that the majority of the single parents and single people are probably female rather than male?
We don't have I don't have whether they're male or female at the moment, I'm afraid, to be able to say what the answer is to that question at the moment. We just know that single people are highly affected, usually because, well, quite a lot of the time they don't have enough money compared to their outgoings, because they've got high rents, high bills, so they struggle the most. But yeah, sorry, I couldn't tell you whether they're male or female at the moment.
Could I just ask, Marianne, is there a particular reason you've asked that question?
It's because I think women have been taking the lion's share of problems with being made unemployed and furloughed. So I think this possibly may be contributing to it as well.
Right, okay. Yeah. Thank you. I hesitate to ask Sharon and Libby's team to add any more work to them, but is that something that could be done in future, do you think, Sharon, to identify that, or is it just going to be too complicated?
We may well be able to get that quite easily, because we collect titles and names on a form, so we may be able to provide that information. It will just take a bit of adding into the tables to pull the data out. So I will have a look, certainly.
Yeah, but yeah, okay. Well, thanks for that. Is that all right, Marianne? Is there anything else you wanted to ask, Marianne?
That's fine, thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right. I think next on my list is Councillor Allen. Mike, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for a complex report. It's difficult following it all, Sharon. And I wonder if you could perhaps email us some of that data. But what I'm intrigued about is you've had some discussions with Devon County and DWP. Have they got any ideas at all about where to go in terms of what's happening from particularly from March onwards? And secondly, I'm a little surprised that we've not had a surge post-Christmas in terms of applications. So just wanted to remark on that. Thank you.
Sharon, did you want to respond to that, please?
Yeah, in terms of what's going to happen from March, I think we're waiting on the DWP to advise on whether they're going to be supplying any more funding. Certainly the feedback is that there is a need from feedback from people on the call. So yeah, I don't know what they're going to do, to be honest, but I mean that's it's kind of a minister's government's decision, I guess. But I think they are aware of what people are saying, and authorities are telling them that, you know, there is a need there to support vulnerable people and people that are struggling. With Devon County, I think we'll continue those conversations with them. Again, they're concerned and want to see what can be done, but there is conversations about, does more need to be done rather than just supporting, just providing emergency support. There does need to be more understanding and more trying to do preventative work rather than just always sticky plaster approaches. So that there are conversations going on around that. I can't remember what the other question was, sorry.
No, it's all right, Sharon, you covered them all. Thank
all right,
you ever
okay.
so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Sharon, thanks. Right, Councillor de Sarum, Bruce, please.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Sharon. A very excellent update. I just want to, with the Christmas holidays that have just gone, as it were, looking at other examples of hardship support. Do you know how much or what the take up was for the school holiday voucher scheme that was mentioned in our notes? Because obviously it is important to protect the welfare of children outside of the school term. Thank you, Sharon.
Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, Sharon.
I think the vouchers went out from Devon County, and I think they just pick up everybody who was on free school meals. So I'm not sure whether everyone used their vouchers or what happened there, but they did send them out. I don't know the numbers, I'm afraid. Yeah, sorry, I can't reply for that one.
No, thank you. It's very helpful anyway, Sharon.
Okay, thanks, Bruce. Councillor Chapman, Maddie, thank you.
Morning, Chair.
Hi.
Sharon, yes, I was going to pick up on what Marion has said, and I'm a bit concerned at the moment. We put out the emergency phone number for us to contacts, and you said that there were quite a lot of phone calls from people that didn't have energy and food problems, but had other problems. Now we're at the end of January, and you said you're working through the list. I'm a bit worried that, you know, after 4 or 5 weeks that people have phoned an emergency number for help, be it for whatever problem, if they've not been got back to yet. So can you tell me how far you've got through the list? And if you are having problems and you have not got enough staff, can I find out from John Golding if he can move someone over to go through this list? Because I would hate to think that someone was in dire straits, and it's 5 weeks since they've contacted us. I just need something to make myself feel a bit more comfortable with the idea, if you like, Sharon. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Maddie. Sarah, are you able to shed any light on that, please?
Yeah, so when people apply for emergency support, we do get back to them. Our aim is no longer than 3 days. So we do get money out to them straight away as an emergency response. We do have those extra cases that I was mentioning was the more in-depth work, and we will still continue supporting them financially if we don't get to them straight away. So yes, we do have cases that need to be looked at, but that's the more in-depth work rather than the emergency support. Perhaps I'm not sure if I made that clear before. So we are making payments to people within 2 to 3 days the majority of the time. Over Christmas, it was a little bit behind because of the sheer volume that came in, but I think we were within a week of people contacting us. So, but we are now back within, I believe, 2 or 3 days. Actually, it might be less than that because some people worked over the weekends to get right up to date. So, does that kind of answer?
Yeah, that helps me quite well. The in-depth report. Have you got enough staff to cover this? You know, it is quite tricky.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it has been really busy. We had to put a lot of resource into the emergency applications over Christmas because of the sheer volume coming in. So yes, we do have some cases, but we are working on those now. So and we've actually sorted it all out. So we've got a plan of action to catch up on those more in-depth things, but people are still getting the financial support as they need it, emergency wise.
Okay then, thanks, Lovey.
Well, thanks very much to both of you. Thank you. I can't see any more hands, but I've got a couple of things I just wanted to follow up with you, Sharon. The one is about the loan sharks that Councillor De Sarum mentioned that came from Maddie originally. Do you know whether, I'm trying to save Libby having to speak too much because of a cough, so if you're able to answer that, was contact made with the County Council and sort of a highlighting to people about loan sharks before Christmas? I know that's what we talked about at the last meeting.
I'm not sure, to be honest with you at the moment. I mean, we're having conversations with Devon County about the overall picture and whether what's going on with the loan sharks at the moment. I don't know for definite. I would need to go away and find that out.
Okay. I'm just looking to see whether Libby is able to speak or not. As I say, I don't really want to ask her to speak too much because of a cough. But no, I can't see her. No, we'll leave that for now. Okay, thank you. Yeah, it'd be useful to have that information, I think.
Yeah, sure.
Because it's a constant, it's not just a Christmas thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Highlighted at Christmas more, isn't it? But certainly it's an all year round issue, and it seems to be getting worse, doesn't it? So the other thing I just wanted to ask you about was and Libby mentioned it at one of the meetings we had recently about the District Council network. I don't know whether you know about that they've asked our council to be one of 7 district councils to look into poverty issues. And I don't know whether you're able to explain that a bit more, because this panel may not know about that, and I don't know much about it. So I just wanted to know whether you have any information. I know Libby would, but I'm not sure that she's able to answer at the minute.
Yeah, so I think it was a couple of weeks ago I attended a meeting with Devon County and the Devon Community Foundation. So yeah, they want to kind of explore the underlying issues, what more can be done, and about that preventative work, and kind of look at so food insecurity, for example, about looking at that in a wider context as a symptom of poverty, and you know what's the underlying reasons for it, what work they can do to identify those, and really kind of bring it together, maybe a bit more across Devon. So that was an initial conversation, I think a couple of weeks ago. And then I think they're going to be asking sorry, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but they are going to be asking somebody to look into a report on that for them. So further conversations, I think, will be happening, but it was very early days. But that's kind of what they're looking at, is, you know, is this more, how do we do preventative action as well as provide the emergency support alongside that, but it is more about moving forward.
Okay.
Does that kind of...
Yeah, I think so. And I think John's got his hand up as well, so John may be able to add a bit to that. Thanks for that, Sharon. John, would you like to speak? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to say that you might recall that we had quite a few conversations with County when we were formulating the poverty strategy that we subsequently adopted. And when we were doing the research, there were very, very few district level local authorities that had got a poverty strategy. So Devon County were quite excited about the fact that we were adopting one, and obviously now have adopted it, because it's normally unitary authorities that typically have poverty strategies, so not so much districts. And so County were really keen that we shared our work with other Devon districts and even wider. And it's been a subject of a number of Team Devon meetings. Of course, we're happy to share some of the things that we do and learn from good practice from elsewhere. And I'll touch on it a bit more when we come to agenda item 7, if I may.
Yeah, okay, lovely. Thanks, John. Thanks a lot. I just got the impression when it was mentioned at one of the meetings I was at when Libby mentioned it, that it was quite a, I hate to say it, but a bit of a feather in our cap, you know, that we were one of the few districts, perhaps if the only district, that had got a poverty strategy. And it was quite a, you know, we were being looked at as a kind of a lead in this. So that's really good. That's really good. And I think we should all be very proud of that. And not just officers, but members as well. So thanks for clarifying that. And we'll see what you have to say later on as well. Thank you. I'm just looking to see, I think Marianne, yes, you've got your hand up. Would you like to speak, please?
Yes, I think it's absolutely fantastic what John's just explained. It really is a tremendous thing for our little district council to be recognised in this context. Going back to my previous comment about unfairness and people not being able to afford energy and food, I would just like to point out that the Equal Pay Act came in 1970. And I believe I'm right in saying that we still don't actually have equal pay, which of course is why women struggle, because they're paid less, so they have less, so they can save less, so they can't afford to pay their rent as a consequence, and all the other bills that come in.
Yeah, quite. I don't know what to say to that. I think we're probably all aware of that, but yeah, it's government legislation again as well, isn't it? I mean, I was going to mention later on, I'll mention it briefly.
Dare I interject and say government legislation predominantly made by men?
Made by, sorry? I didn't catch that.
Men.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh at that, but yes, yeah, quite. Yeah, I was going to mention later about the role that, you know, we just talked about the DCN and the fact that we have a poverty strategy and that officers are working, you know, they're absolutely committed to it. But I think members are as well. And one of the things that we can do as members is we can lobby. Officers can't do that. And so I think that's something just to think about. I'm not sure how successful we would be with something like that, because often lobbying doesn't get you anywhere, but sometimes it does. So I think if we can think of any ways in which we can encourage the government or pressure the government to do anything differently, I think this is certainly the time to do it. I mean, all the headlines now are about the rising cost of living for a whole range of reasons, and it's just going to get worse. So I think we just need to think about that, and whether as members we should be talking more to our MPs and government ministers. So, you know, that's just, I'll throw that one in for people to think about. Okay, thanks. Councillor Allen, thank you. Mike.
Thank you. Speaking as a man, I just thought I'd throw in the fact that Megan and I and other members put forward the poverty strategy originally. And as far as I'm concerned, I've been lobbying ever since to try and get our MPs in particular, and even Boris Johnson I lobbied personally to actually look again at the whole issue of poverty. But I think that one of the things that this council has done superbly well, and that's why I think Libby and Sharon and others have done a fantastic job, and so has John, is it's joined up thinking. And the one thing that is clearly missing in most central government policies is this joined up thinking that you're now doing so well. And I just want to congratulate you on the way that you are working. And along with Jamie Buckley's work with community groups, all of that is part of the solution. And I'm delighted you were receptive and developed the idea of financial counselling, because that's another key area that people can climb out of poverty if they know how to handle their finances better. And again, I keep, and I've kept coming across people who actually had enough funds coming in, but just didn't handle them very well. I think the worst of all is the issue of rent and housing. And really, we need to come back and have a good look at that. And it's not just something within John and Megan's control. It's something that the whole council needs to take another look at, because rent housing is shrinking in our area and it's critically important for our community. So thanks ever so much. I just thought I couldn't let Marion Rixon get away with her sexist comment.
Thank you, Mike. You've G'd us all up there now. Thank you. I'll just whip outside the panel for a minute to Eleanor. Eleanor, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Megan. So thank you for allowing me to come in, actually, because I didn't actually miss the boat earlier. I was in the middle of something. So I'm sure Councillor Woodward would probably mention this if he were here. So I hope I'm not overstepping what he would say. But a sort of co-factor in a lot of the poverty cases we come across at the moment involve mental health problems. And I know that we can't solve the mental health strategy for the entire country, but I'm wondering whether we can possibly encourage local GPs to do more social prescribing, and suggest that people go into the things that we actually do have some level of control over, such as community groups, and trying to get people more connected with other people so that they can start to develop their own resilience networks. And I don't know, obviously I don't have access to the figures of poverty. I can only speak from what we see in Broadcliffe and what we have seen over the last 2 years. But there does seem to be a significant number, a not insignificant number, of single people who are men with mental health issues who are stuck in a virtually impossible to escape poverty cycle because they don't qualify for the kind of help that is offered to other categories of people. But their predominant factor is the mental health issues, which is stopping them from accessing the services and possibly leaving their houses for months on end. And so we can't solve this country's health strategy with regard to mental health, but we can potentially point people to places where they could get some level of support. And I'm just wondering whether that the social prescribing thing, whether we're managing to liaise with local prescribing centres, like hospitals or doctor surgeries, and asking that, pointing out what our services are and where we can offer support, the support that we can offer. So are we alerting health centres basically to what we are able to offer people? That's my question. Thank you.
Thanks.
Otherwise, thank you for everything you're doing.
It's okay. Thanks, Eleanor. Now, my understanding is that social prescribing has stopped. I might be wrong about that, but that's my understanding. And I don't know whether, I see John's got his hand up. I'm not sure whether John's got anything to say. Would you like to speak, John? But that's my understanding, that social prescribing is no longer available.
Well, I was going to pick up on a couple of things, if I might, Chair, and Helen might be better placed. I see she's got a hand up as well on social prescribing. But if I might, I just wanted to pick up on something that Councillor Allen said that for me has been really important in this whole journey, and that's this idea of cross-service working, or treating poverty as a cross-cutting issue. That is absolutely vital for a number of things that we're doing at the moment, poverty being one, but also you can include within that category things like climate change and some of our environmental work. And it's the passion and enthusiasm that colleagues have shown for this subject that's allowed us to do that. So in terms of poverty, as you well know, we're working with public health in terms of Helen's role, with housing colleagues on the call today, with our finance colleagues, and also our economic development colleagues seem to sort of form the core of what we're doing. And it's because of those people that are really enthusiastic about this subject that we've managed to produce a strategy, and more importantly, we're starting to have some traction in terms of supporting people. That's going to become even more important in the future, as we're hearing in the media each day. And credit to the council, it's very prominent in the council plan now, this subject. So just really wanting to thank colleagues for getting behind this, and I say the real test is going to come as we deliver the strategy going forward. Perhaps Helen might want to pick up on the social prescribing question.
Thank you, John. Yes, thanks. Helen, would you like to comment on that? Did I dream it, or has social prescribing gone out of the window now?
Oh, good morning, panel. It's quite a complicated picture about social prescribing. Until a really very few years ago, it was seen by many GPs as something quite outside their normal way of thinking. Then it suddenly became quite a fashionable thing to be promoting. The slight problem that we have is that across East Devon, we've got 3 different primary care networks. So it's very difficult to lobby as a whole cohort. So we can do work with the Woodbury, Exmouth, Budley, PCN group. We can do work with the Honiton and Ottery group. There's another group covering Axminster. Cranbrook itself is actually covered through Exeter. So it's really difficult to liaise closely to share what we're doing. We did do quite a lot of work a few years ago with the countryside team to explain to GPs, you know, these are the sort of activities that our teams lead with volunteers. You might want to prescribe some of your patients into those activities. So we put a lot of effort into doing that. Then, of course, along came the pandemic, and really all of the GPs have had nothing on their minds other than getting jabs in arms and helping with that agenda. So it has gone a bit quiet, and as Councillor Armstrong and John have referenced, there has been quite a change in the programme locally. We're not absolutely sure what the change is going to look like, but this is just my understanding that the Ways to Wellbeing service has been perhaps parked, and more focus is being put on mental health specifically. So the Ways to Wellbeing used to prescribe to physical activities, cookery classes, knit and natter groups, depending on what was seen as appropriate for those particular patients. So the most sort of perhaps active group started in the Honiton surgery, but it spread out across other parts of East Devon. What Honiton surgery are now doing is leading the way with a change in direction so that their focus is more on mental health. So I met, I can't remember when, a few months ago with two of the sort of signpost champions working out of Honiton GP practice. That model has seemed to be the way forward now. So other areas of East Devon are adopting the same sort of model. So I'm fairly sure that the Woodbury, Exmouth and Budleigh primary care network are looking to do the same. So what seems to be happening is the more general Ways to Wellbeing service is perhaps realigning so that its focus is more on mental health. What I don't know is whether it's the same staff. I'm not aware that the same staff are going to be tupied over. I think the posts have been advertised, but we've been trying to get a clearer picture, John Golding and I, as part of the LED steering process. So, John, I don't know whether you heard anything more about that process.
No, Helen, same position. I think it will continue in some form, modified, as you say, to reflect the mental health issues more, but we're waiting to hear from our health colleagues as to what that's going to look like in the future.
Okay, thanks, John. Thanks, Helen. Yeah, sorry, so it sounds a bit of a confused picture then, Eleanor, by the sound of it at the moment, but it's certainly a really good point you brought up. I'd really well support the social prescribing. So we'll wait and see, and we'll let you know when we hear anything, presumably. Helen, we're looking at you, John, to update us.
I do my best to liaise with various GPs. It's finding the right one who's got the interest in what you're trying to talk about, and one who's got some sort of leverage at the primary care network, because they don't normally do things on a surgery by surgery basis. They are normally working as a network, and indeed the clinical commissioning group to give steer and to give funding. So certainly mental health prescribing in some sort of way looks like it's going to be their way forward. Does that help for now?
Yes, I think so. Is that all right, Eleanor?
Yeah, I'm just concerned that mental health doesn't necessarily include very high levels of shyness, for example, or social isolation. So there may be people who are falling between the cracks. Nevertheless, even if they are being taken, taking charge, being overseen by a mental health team or mental health doctor, they may still fall between the cracks. And it seems a shame when we can offer people things. Well, not we, but the community can offer people support which isn't medicalised, but yeah. Sorry.
Sorry, may I? My understanding is that the Honiton team, it's within the GP surgery, and it's a sort of hierarchy of, so the first two sort of champion signposters, I can't remember their job titles, they would, I suspect, deal with those sorts of, social isolation, loneliness, sort of social skills by signposting to groups in probably a very similar way that the Ways to Wellbeing team did. If they get stuck, they refer a person, a GP patient, up. So they've got a little hierarchy of the general signposters, then somebody who does one-to-one coaching, and then at the top of the pyramid there is a registered mental health nurse. So that's all working, my understanding, out of Honiton surgery, and that's the model that other primary care networks are going to adopt. I think if the registered mental health nurse got stuck, they would then be able to triage into the mental health NHS trust, which is Devon Partnership. So it's quite a complicated process of sort of signposting upwards through that sort of hierarchy of staff.
Thank you very much, Helen, for that mine of information. Thank you. Okay, I can't see any other hands. So if there's nothing else you wanted to add, Sharon, before we move on, is there?
Sorry, couldn't get off on mute. Yeah, no, I mean, the team have actually been working with the PCN group out of Honiton, and we've actually been in contact with the Axminster one as well. So we are working with them to help with those underlying issues, and we can continue to kind of find out what other support's about. So we are signposting and getting people to mental health support.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's it from me.
Thank you very much. Thanks ever so much, Sharon, for your update. Okay. And we'll see you again, no doubt. But well done for everything that you're doing, and Libby and everybody. Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Okay, bye. So we'll move on to item 6. Overview of new service plans for 2022-23 and how they support the poverty agenda. Helen, again.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. If I may, I'm just trying to share my screen. So,
yeah, that's fine.
Is it shut? Oops.
Yeah, I can see it. I can see it.
Lovely. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. So what I'm doing this morning for this agenda item is giving us a quick overview of how the new service plans that have been prepared for 2022 to 23, how they support the poverty agenda. So just a quick, so this is as much me thinking how I was going to do this as trying to explain it to you. I'm trying to explain it to myself. So we worked over the last couple of years to devise the poverty strategy, which John Golding wrote, and then from that formed an action plan with all the associated SMART objectives. Then during the autumn of last year, the panel heard from various service leads a review of their own progress in their own services to date. And what we're now doing is looking at the new service plans and how they support the poverty agenda. So it's work in progress, and it's a cyclical process. So what we're doing, we plan ahead and then we perform the work, we monitor how we're making progress, and we review then how well we performed against our actions. So again, just trying to sort of map the different stages, starting with our poverty action plan. We've got our SMART objectives. The various teams perform their roles, we monitor and we review. So that's the cycle that I'm trying to support with. What I've done, I didn't have time, I only started doing this piece of work last week when I'd already got other things scheduled as well. So what I've done is just look for some examples of how our service plans support the agenda. I don't know whether I can move the black box at the top, so I'm not quite sure whether you can see the title of my slide. But this is one that comes from the housing team. So in the Poverty Action Plan, item 1.4, we're going to support council tenants and other low-income residents' households to access financial support and provide advice on benefits, budgeting and money issues. So this is how the Housing Service Plan have met this particular agenda item. So in section 3, part 1, they're going to develop their existing tenancy support and sustainability service. Those people are tasked with proactively supporting tenants to maintain their tenancies, and that's budgeting, new tenant inductions, tenancy sign-up briefings, looking at the possible provision of floating support for vulnerable tenants in sheltered and general needs housing, an annual visit to all tenants who reside in council housing. So that's one example of how the Housing Service Plan exactly mirrors the Poverty Action Plan. So similarly, I looked at just one example from the Finance Service. So on the right-hand side in the Poverty Action Plan, item 1.1, exploring the opportunity for developing a poverty dashboard that draws on data from a range of different sources to allow us to gather, understand and use the data to help shape policy and inform on future intervention. And as we've already heard this morning briefly from Libby and in more detail from Sharon, the dashboard is work in progress, but clearly in the service plan objective on page 9, again in section 3, part 1, the finance team have identified to develop and create a poverty dashboard in order to better measure and give greater insight into the impact of poverty within the district. It's initially to be based on existing data sets and will then be developed to include external data sets. And the dashboard will help inform future interventions, policy and strategy for supporting low-income households. And that was on page 9. So then I looked at the Environmental Health Service plan for the coming year and how that supports the Poverty Action Plan. So Poverty Action Plan 4.5 is to support private tenants in their homes, taking enforcement action against landlords or property managers whose properties do not meet the required energy efficiency standards. I think it's obvious to all of us that energy is increasingly going to be an issue in the coming few months. So the service plan for environmental health was actually quite long, so I'm now looking at section 3 on page 34. I found the objective stated to increase the use of enforcement powers in the private rented sector to improve housing conditions and tenant safety. I haven't managed to do a full overview yet, and I wanted to explain, think for the working panel to perhaps think together why I haven't found that practical yet. Just move that. So I didn't realistically think I'd be able to finish the job in hand in the space of last week, but I did hope that I would have got a bit further. It's proving complicated because the level of granularity in the Poverty Action Plan isn't yet mirrored in the service plan objectives. And I think perhaps the timing isn't perhaps fully synced. So we do the service plans in late autumn, and we'd already got the Poverty Action Plan. And when we were asking service leads to come to the poverty panel in the autumn, they were reviewing what they had done. There's a I suppose, a structural problem in that the service plan, section 3 has 3 sections in it, which are broken down in some ways into themes. The Poverty Action Plan has 5 sections, and the themes in the 2 documents don't necessarily match. So looking in a bit more detail, I started with Amy's service plan because I checked with her that she was happy for me to look at hers, and she said yes. So I found 10 objectives in the housing service plan which very clearly supports poverty actions, but the poverty action plan actually has about 25 actions for housing, and then those are each broken down into subdivisions. I think very generally, I would say that the documents are all very large, and that's particularly the environmental health one, to be fair. They don't have internal links in them, and they can't easily be sorted. By that, I suppose I'm meaning that if, for instance, I could have sorted in the poverty action plan all of the actions that related to housing, or all of the actions that related to finance or in environmental health, that would perhaps be quicker to sift through. In a very easy way, you can search, for instance, the service plan, you can do a search on the word poverty, but I think we need to be more, take a more professional stance. Obviously, the word poverty might not always be articulated, even though clearly the action itself does support the poverty agenda. So when I do a very, very similar process for the public health report, I'm not just looking for where service leads have stated health and well-being. I am looking with a sort of intellectual approach where I can see that the actions do feed into health and well-being, even if they haven't articulated that. So if it'll let me move on to my suggestions, which John and Megan, I've added this screen in since you looked at my presentation yesterday. My initial thought would be that, for instance, I noticed that the housing service plan does contain very key objectives. So one of those is to deliver the priorities from the poverty strategy and action plan, and another one to provide a greater emphasis on poverty prevention, financial resilience, reduced indebtedness, affordable warmth, and financial equality. I'm just wondering whether we could ask all of the services to follow this example and embed something just to sort of cover in the widest possible sense that the service is looking at the poverty action plan. I'm aware that the service plans have already been published on our internet, so I don't know whether that would be feasible to tweak in that way. So that's my initial recommendation, if that's feasible. Longer term, what I'm happy to try and do is to complete the overview that I've already started. If service leads would like me to do so, Amy said yes. I wasn't sure whether any of the other service leads were already doing this piece of work, and obviously I don't want to duplicate, but I can try and do that if the service leads would like me to, and then you'd be able to take stock at a future meeting. So the only other slides are some of the service plans that I looked at in most detail, and a link to the poverty action plan, and that was all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Helen, for that. I think it might all seem a bit complicated to some of us who have been doing this. But I'm just wondering, do we have any questions? Let's have a look. I'm looking for outside the panel. I don't think there's anybody outside. So Marianne, would you like to comment? Thank you.
Well, I think the thing that is very pleasing to hear is that we're going to be taking enforcement action against landlords who aren't meeting the required energy efficiency standards. I think this could help enormously with the bills that people face, because if they have less to spend on energy and just trying to keep themselves warm, this will help them enormously, both in terms of their mental health and also their disposable income. But I think what is quite shocking to me is that there is no, or has not been any required standard, apparently. And the impact of living in cold homes probably leads to a lot more mould and condensation in houses, which, as the government well knows, because it's on the NHS website, they recognise that this is detrimental to people's health. And I think living in mouldy, damp conditions not only affects children when they're young, it carries through into later life. And so this is something that really ought to be addressed urgently, I think. It's absolutely shocking that we have some of the oldest and leakiest homes in Europe. And this is a quote from a Guardian article last year.
Thank you, Marianne. Thanks for that. Yes, quite agree. So,
do you want me to comment?
Yes, do, Helen. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So private sector housing, I think, are absolutely passionate about this. I think there's been, some change in staff. They've perhaps developed a new sense of direction, and energy efficiency is absolutely one of the things that Jodie's team are, I believe, focusing on. More widely, over several years now, I've argued this to NHS staff whenever I can. We do have a little bit of interest historically, but I would say that's really increasing. So pre-pandemic, I introduced a charity to come to one of the boards, health forum boards across East Devon, to talk about fuel poverty. It was actually quite hard work to get the board, which included at least one GP, to really see that it was something that they could assist with. I really feel that has changed. Although the population health management programme for Littleham had to be parked because of the COVID work, we did get to the stage of introducing fuel poverty as one of the issues that we would look at in that cohort in Littleham. And the cohort had been chosen specifically because they had, I think it was moderate mental health problems. So we were going to see if we could match up through the GP's practice his patients with mental health problems with any sort of fuel poverty needs. So I think we managed to sort of push at a more opening door there with some NHS staff at least, but of course they've been so busy with vaccinations and everything else that the Littleham project has been parked for a little while. We're hoping to pick it up in April. But I think there is more awareness generally about the links between physical and mental health and fuel poverty. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Thanks. Councillor Allen, Mike.
Yes, thanks, Helen. I'm not surprised that you've had a bit of a problem working through. I'm glad you picked up the most cooperative and switched on poverty handling groups. But I've been struggling to bring the poverty agenda into the strategic planning area, and I'm still struggling because I'm not sure if they really get it. For example, the whole area of access to housing and the design, and specifically to help disabled people cope, all of those things, if they're properly planned and designed, will reduce the costs of people right at the fundamental level of proper warmth in their housing because they're properly insulated and so on. So I would certainly recommend this panel asks for a presentation from planning as to how they intend to improve the poverty and incorporate the poverty agenda into the planning that they are doing. Thank you ever so much for doing this, Helen. It's quite a job and a tricky diplomatic one, and I'm sure you're the best person to do it.
Thanks, Mike. Do you have any thoughts on that, Helen?
Oh, thank you very much, Councillor Allen. To be honest, I always refer to John Golding for advising diplomacy. It is quite a big job. I think because it's something to the process that I've been doing with the public health plan. We use exactly the same forward, steering group to monitor, and then reviewing what we did, looking backwards. So I'm familiar with the process. I think trying to sort of marry up the newish poverty action plan and the very new service plans is perhaps going to be a little bit challenging. And you're right, I did do a very quick look through the planning one, and I just searched for the word poverty. That was all I had time to do, and certainly the word poverty didn't feature. That doesn't mean to say that they haven't got actions that would support the poverty action plan, but it's just that they haven't yet articulated it in quite that language.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Actually, I think it's, I don't know what John thinks about this or any of the other officers, but I think it's a really good idea to have planning to come and speak to us. Yeah, why not? But, you know, we can talk about that in a bit. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for suggesting it, Mike. I wonder if at this point, as we're just talking about, we sort of touched on housing and so I just wonder whether Amy, it's her first meeting back. I didn't welcome you at the beginning, Amy. Your first meeting following your maternity leave. So it's nice to have you here. And whether Joe or you wanted to comment on anything that's been said so far, because, you know, I don't want you to feel that you're not able to just dive in there and say things. So if you don't want to, it's all right. We can leave it until later. I don't want to put you on the spot. But, you know, if you've got anything that you think you want to say, please say it. Yeah.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. No, I don't think so. Just to pick up on, or comments, if you like, on what Helen's just said. I think, you know, as we've acknowledged, a lot of the work that housing do relates directly to poverty anyway. So arguably, there's lots of our objectives that you could link back to poverty in some way. And I suppose rather than repeat or have the whole of the poverty strategy within my service plan, it made sense to have that overarching objective that links directly to the poverty strategy to make sure that we don't lose sight of it through the year. So that seemed the best way to do it for me, rather than, you know, repeat it all again in terms of the admin side of it. I appreciate this is all a bit of a technicality with how we present our service plans, but no, just to sort of support what Helen's saying there, really. Thanks, Chair. Okay,
thank you, Amy. Joe, did you want to add anything, or are you all right? No, you're okay. Okay, thanks a lot. Right, Councillor de Sarum, Bruce.
Hello, thank you, Chair. I think that's very good points that have been raised about the services plans. It's clear that we as a panel have done an enormous amount of hard work, because you can see, if I read it correctly, we've come up with at least these 25 actions, and it's clear that the actions and objectives are finding difficulty being incorporated into the plans. But I think that it's very important to do with this in the late autumn, as I think Helen touched on. She said that late autumn we're going to do the service plans. So my thoughts are that perhaps Helen would liaise with the relevant teams again this late autumn to see if she can add in the bits and pieces that are needed to be added in. So that is my suggestion, which I make to this committee, that Helen will go forward and continue to work on it as she's done, giving us this excellent examples, and perhaps in the late autumn she'll be able to put more into the service plans to match. I mean, it's obvious that we have lots of actions which clearly need to be taken forward, but obviously the problem is how do they fit in the service plan, and that's why I think Helen will take that forward. So yeah, a very, very excellent work, Helen, and I hope you found my suggestion helpful.
Thank you, Bruce. Helen, did you want to comment on that?
Yes, I think that is the right timetable to be reminding the service leads in the autumn that this is what the panel would like to see in the service plans before they're published. Probably it would have a bit more leverage if some of you were to endorse the suggestion rather than it just being me talking to the service leads, in just the same way that we found with the public health plan, is that, and as Amy touched on as well, you know, really you could argue that most of the activities done by all the various services are supporting, I would argue, health and well-being, very similarly overlapped with poverty. And as Amy says, you can't necessarily copy all of it into the service plan that's already in the poverty plan, because both documents then will become so burdensome for people to read through. But it would be helpful, perhaps, in the same way that you suggested, asking planning to come to talk to the working panel, just to perhaps enforce the message that I would be giving, that that's what you'd like to see in their service plans. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Thanks for that. Councillor Arnott. Paul, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak briefly, I hope. I just want to go to the idea of Mike, Councillor Allen's, that seems such a good idea, but sometimes some of these ideas are perhaps not such a good idea. So with respect, poverty, right, so that is already stitched through our council plan and then will be in our service plans as well, as I think John would probably confirm. It's already in there, it's embedded, it has to be thought of across the board. In particular, there are certain areas where we can do stuff, and I suppose economy is particularly the case there as well, in terms of jobs, type of jobs. And the other area, which is very much part of the emerging local plan, is attainable, affordable homes and housing, on which there is an enormous amount happening. And the new task force on that is just about to start. I think what we could end up doing with the local plan, if we started trying to include poverty as something in there the whole time, let us say along the lines of race or gender or whatever, on absolutely everything in every discussion, it would grind to a halt, and it is already an incredibly overloaded process. And I say that advisedly as somebody who sat through it. I think Councillor Rylance did as well, Councillor Rickson, possibly Councillor Desarum, Councillor Faithful, something like 12 hours last week of pitches from landowners and developers on where they'd like to build. The lobbying that can be done, which you referred to earlier, Chair, it could be very useful. So let me get rid of that. There you go, that's my son. That's how much I care about poverty. He can go away, boy. These are national things, aren't they? So, as was said earlier, we should be very proud that this council has built on the legacy from the previous administration to have a well-developed poverty policy, which we can be proud of within the Devon context. But the big issues are more things like universal benefit, aren't they? They're about the right to buy, they're about the living wage, they're about a complete lack of any transport policy from central government. So this is meant as a helpful interjection, Chair, in the sense that I think if you asked planning officers or planning portfolios to appear before this panel, I think they might just smack their heads and go, God, how much more do you want to overload us with? Because we're directed by the council plan, we're already doing it. But that's just a personal point of view. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. I think my view, and it may be a naive view, is that I think as all the other teams, or most of the other teams who are out there doing, sort of face-to-face work with the public, are sort of signed into this. And yes, in theory, the planning team are included in that, but they haven't actually spoken to us. And I think, and Mike will be able to speak for himself about this, I'm sure, but it's just about this idea of, making sure that they are fully aware of the poverty strategy. And what we're not asking, my view is we wouldn't be asking them to do any extra work. It's just to clarify that they understand the poverty strategy and all the things that they intend to, to do within the, strategic planning and planning in general, that they're aware of that. For example, the energy efficiency of homes, simply, and that kind of thing. So I'll shut up a minute now. I'll let. I'm just looking to see. I'm just wondering whether John, do you want to come in at this point? Because you might make it more clear than I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. So I'm a bit more positive about this. Helen's exercise has unveiled some useful learning for us in this process. We could align the various plans better. I think that's work in progress. They are operating to different timescales, which might partly explain why some of the service plans haven't incorporated all of the poverty actions in our action plan. Obviously, service plans are annual. Our strategy goes over 10 years, if I remember right. We've got there over the years with some of the health and wellbeing stuff, which is now much easier to extract. The read across is much better. We're having similar issues with the climate change, extracting the climate change stuff. So for these cross-cutting themes, the documents for different purposes, we tend to extract the actions that are of interest to, in this case, the poverty strategy, but we're doing something similar on climate change to see where all those actions are across the different services. And as I say, I think in Helen's world, because we've done it over a number of years, we're much clearer aligned with the public health strategy and the service plans. And I think we'll get there over time, and we'll use this learning that Helen's extracted from this exercise to improve things as we go forward. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks, John. Thanks. Did you want to come back on that, Paul, before we move on to the next speaker?
No, you've heard enough from me, Megan. Thank you.
Councillor Rylands, Eleanor, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I can only concur and echo what our Supreme Leader just said, actually. So we often hear talk of multiple types of poverty, of fuel poverty, of period poverty, of food poverty. Given that these all are aspects of an inability to afford the basics, they are aspects of poverty, and it may help to bring the concept of poverty closer to people's hearts by giving it a descriptor. But this is poverty. This is what poverty looks like: an inability to afford the basics, right at the bottom of the Maslow's hierarchy of need. That is poverty. So how can we help without imposing too much extra work on our officers? Well, anecdotally, and I think probably other people will have similar experiences, a lot of the problems with poverty come from a mismatch between people's income and their single biggest outgoing every month, which is their housing costs. I think as a council, we're pointing in the right direction because we are actually aiming to deliver social housing. And I actually think we should up the ante on that, and we should aim to deliver social housing that is also as close to passive house standards as we can get it, so that people aren't having to spend vast amounts of their income on either the rent or the heating. Make houses that need very little fuel in the first place. And we'll be that, as a cross-cutting theme, you don't get much better than that, because that will also address, our climate change ambitions and aims. We'll go some way to it anyway. But I do think we need to have a very in-depth and overarching discussion in the country about what sort of houses we want to be living in, and whether our attachment to the old should supersede the climate change debate. Should we be keeping a vast numbers of Victorian houses that are uninsulated and impossible to retrofit, or should we be levelling them and building something that's actually passive house standard? I mean, this is a debate. This is not a debate for East Devon Council necessarily, but it's something we could contribute to. And I just think sometimes we're trying to rearrange deck chairs on Titanic, really, to be honest, with trying to retrofit, or we're talking about how to retrofit houses that are fundamentally not adapted to climate change. And maybe we should be levelling them and starting again. And maybe this is a debate we should be having with central government about how we handle our existing housing stock. But I think we need to carry on building social housing, and that would help a lot with people's personal budgets. But we need to try and aim to get it as efficient, as energy efficient as we possibly can. My preference would be passive house standard, because then people would not be spending anything on heating. But if we can't get to passive house standard, as near as damn it to passive house standard would be good. I mean, it is being done in other local authorities. We can do it. So how we do it is the question, and that would help everything we're talking about at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. And I think you're probably preaching to the converted. For most of the people who are sitting in this room, we all agree. And I know that certainly Joe and Amy and John would really well agree with you. So do I. So it's something that's high on the agenda. I know certainly for Joe's new role in a couple of weeks' time. So thank you for that. Anyway, thank you for reminding us. Yeah, so I've got Councillor Allen. Mike, thank you.
Yes, I just wanted to come back on some comments that have been made. I think that if you look at what could be done locally in terms of planning regulation, then there are a large number of things that would affect the poverty agenda. We have to debate what percentage of affordable housing we should target. I mean, that's an obvious issue with regard to poverty management. We have a chance to make policies on design and accessibility of new housing, which hits directly the agenda which Councillor Brixton has brought together. And I think that there are very good reasons why somebody from the strategic area of planning should look at how this affects some of these issues. I have put forward to Councillor Arnott a suggestion about having an inclusive policy. I hope that that is supportable at the next strategic planning meeting. It's not that I want to create them more work, it's that we at this stage are in a situation of being able to form policies which have to be developed anyway. And these policies can have a tilt towards improving poverty, taking account of disability, and so on. The plan itself, the initial phase of population statistics forecast 70% of the growth of housing needs will be in the retired age groups. Well, if you build houses for young families and sell them to retired age groups, they're going to modify them immediately. So we've got to get a balance into this situation, because we need to attract young families to stay and work here. We need to make sure that older people can downsize so that they will make available housing which is suitable for families to move into. These are part of an agenda for poverty prevention, and I think it would be worth discussing it. If we're not prepared to discuss that, why are we here? Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Mike. Yeah, very useful, yeah. Let me just have a look. Who have we got on the list now? So, Marianne, Councillor Rickson, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to come back with regard to Eleanor's comment about perhaps needing to flatten older homes and then build new ones. Just think of the energy costs consumed in steel, cement, and all this sort of thing. They are absolutely huge, and it is avoidable. There was an article on the ITV website where if you live in Italy and you want to insulate walls and windows and install a heat pump boiler or solar panels, the government will pay you 110% of the cost. Yes, 110%. It's an enormous offer that's being taken up in huge numbers, leading the government in Rome to claim that in the first 8 months of this year, they have reduced emissions of CO2 from home heating by as much as they did in the last 20 years. This was also reported in Euronews in October 2021, and it states that the Italian government introduced this radical scheme because it, quotes, didn't believe residents would adapt their homes without it. Ministers thought that if a part payment initiative was introduced, take-up would be low and change would never happen on the scale required, especially as much of Italy's housing stock was built before the 20th century and needs a lot of work in order to bring it up to modern eco-friendly standards. This could be the solution if only the government would adopt it.
Thank you, Marianne. I'm just concerned that we're going a bit off the subject here. We're talking about how Helen addresses, how we all address how to put forward the service plans and the work that we're trying to do within the action plan, poverty action plan. So I think if we can try and concentrate on that, thank you. Councillor Chapman, Maddie.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we're all working very hard on this, and it does feel like we're going around a bit on a roundabout, and knowing when to jump off and what to push off and what to pull on. It's all getting a bit much. But one thing that did stick out to me last week, and the leader brought it up, saying, sitting last week for 2 days, listening to the landowners, I was quite sad at the end, looking at all the land coming forward for building, etc., etc. And only one landowner actually came up with the idea of community. And I'm old enough to remember my grandparents after the war saying that all the prefabs were built for housing, but they all had a community hub. They all had a centre where they could meet, they could discuss their problems. They all had allotments that they could grow vegetables together and things like that. And I thought, yes, we're talking about 3 and 4 bedroom houses, and how many affordable houses, which I don't think are affordable anyway, on the salaries down here. And I think to myself, there is no sense of community in our planning policy. You know, this really, really does worry me. I've been fighting this for 7 years, Megan, as you know. Up here in Brixington, you know, I've got 5,000 residents when Goodbore's Farm is finished that have to get into a car to go to a shop, and they can't send their children first thing in the morning to go to a local shop to pick up a pint of milk, and there's nowhere for the fathers up round here to play football, knockabout with their kids. I think it's outrageous, and we're not looking at it. And we're looking at poverty, and we're looking at mental health, and it's all interlinked. And I feel sure if we had more sense of community, people wouldn't feel so isolated, because when they have mental health issues, it seems to me that is when they get into problems dealing with their personal finances, personal relationships, and it brings on all sorts of trouble. Where they, you know, they can't meet up with their locals, get to know their neighbours. I'm lucky in my road, but I don't know the people very well in the next road because we have no community centre. And I don't know what the leader thinks about this, or the chairman of strategic planning. But building houses is one thing, building community is something else. And yes, I would like to hear what the planning department think about the lack of a community infrastructure, because I thought East Devon was going to build new estates with community infrastructure. Well, community infrastructure has gone out the window. We've got affordable housing, which isn't affordable. So we don't seem to be getting much off this roundabout. That's all I got to say on that one, Chair. I'll leave it with you.
Thank you very much. I totally agree. As a community worker, I totally agree. I've been banging the drum for more years than I care to remember, but yeah, thank you. fully agree with that. Councillor Faithful, Peter, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if I'm going off track at all or whatever, but I'll say what I was going to say anyway. Let's talk about affording, I think this is partly the previous agenda item, being able to afford heating or not. From an environmental climate change point of view, we did the survey back along, some of us, and you get more points if your house temperature, the lower your house internal temperature is in winter. So if it's below 14, you get more points. So, you know, which way, yeah, my kitchen temperature is 54 degrees, which I think is probably a lot colder than most people would normally expect. But that's, you know, climate change is saying we want a lower temperature anyway, because you're not using so much energy. So I think you anyway, that's all I was going to say. You know, how much do we need to be spending on the heating in the first place, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Yeah. Councillor Arnott again. Paul, thanks.
Thank you, Megan. I'm sure we're way off this agenda item, but I just wanted to say if Maddie was anywhere near me, I'd now be putting her on my shoulders and marching around Exmouth. I mean, I couldn't agree more. Absolutely right. And possibly I've let my irritation show during those meetings last week. I mean, what we basically had was one upper crust landowner, one set of landowners who described themselves as a farming family, and a couple of major national house builders pitching to us their various bits of land. Well, that's their right to do, isn't it? They own the land. But what I have to say really stuck in my throat was the greenwash that they applied all over these ideas. I think just about every single one promised a new orchard. So, you know, obviously, you know, shares in cider will soar in Devon. But there was no sustainable plan in any of them for how management companies were going to run these new settlements in future. And I totally agree with Maddie. We have got it completely the wrong way around. Now, going through the process that we have to go through to get to the local plan, we must allow these people to be heard. And I think the difference between the way this administration, if you like, has been doing it in previous ones is we've done it right out in the open very early on so that we can sort of see what the problems are very early on. But I really agree with Maddie. We need to whack some vision back into this to encourage them to see that what they're planning, you know, if they're going to build 500 homes somewhere, that's a lot of money. A lot of money. That's a very, you know, comfortable few millions profits, and sometimes just for private families. If you're going to make that kind of cash, don't just spend it on sending the kids to Eton. Put something back in, like a Victorian philanthropist. Well, in the old days, they used to build you a church, didn't you? Maybe a scout hut. Well, nobody seems to be building churches anymore. I'm not inviting a contribution from Councillor Allen there, but perhaps they are, I don't know. But where is the social conscience or the social vision in any of this? I completely agree. And I think, Chair, if I may, I saw Roy Hattersley do this once on Question Time many years ago. I'd like to just completely change my mind about the role your committee can have possibly in being a necessary irritant to the local plan process as it goes forward. I can see the point in that now, because everything I've heard is, I think there's a small R radical spirit across the membership, no matter what party they're in. And I think this type of thing that Maddie said needs to be heard more widely. So thank you. I've no idea where I've lost where we are on the agenda. So terribly sorry. I really will.
No, have I. Even more worryingly. Thank you very much for that, Paul. Thanks for understanding where a lot of us are coming from on this panel. Yeah. So I haven't got any more speakers. So what I'd like to do is And I'm sorry, Helen, but I haven't got a copy of the recommendations in front of me that you've inserted recently. So
okay.
Do you want to just read those out again, and then I don't know whether John wants to input before we decide, which way to go on this. If you just want to go through the recommendations, and then we're all clear what we want you to do, if that's all right. Thank you.
So my first suggestion was whether we could ask all of the services to follow the example that housing have done. So they've got a sort of overarching objective to deliver the priorities from the poverty strategy and action plan. There is one more that gives a bit more detail, but I thought just that statement, deliver the priorities from the poverty strategy and action plan, if we could ask all service plans to incorporate that I thought would be the first step. And then longer term, the suggestion was a recommendation for me to complete the overview that I've started already.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. That sounds very simple. Yeah.
So the service plans have already been published. So what I don't know is whether there's any sort of process by which we can ask for an extra sentence to be put in, or whether we've missed the boat for this year.
Okay, thank you. I'll defer to John. John, have you got any thoughts on that, please?
We don't normally go back and revisit the service plans, particularly as they've been through overview and scrutiny and such like. So I think it's probably best something for next year. And we could include a recommendation around better alignment between the service plans and the poverty strategy. And I'm sure colleagues, service leads will pick up on that and incorporate that in the next iteration. As I said earlier, I think this is working practice. We'll get better at it.
Yeah.
Just a point of order on that. Just out of information, really, the service plans have to go to main council for final approval, and there's nothing stopping us as councillors putting forward that particular suggestion that Helen made, and then incorporating it.
Right. What do you think, John?
Well, that is correct. They're not finalised really until they've been adopted by full council. So if that's the panel's wish, you can put that forward in the notes of the meeting. Is it
going to complicate things too much at this stage? Not that worried as in the past, I know, but
a little, but it's not insurmountable.
Okay. Does everybody else agree with that? And do they agree with the proposals by Helen? I mean, can we agree as a panel on those actions?
Yes.
Let's just have a look. Yeah. Well, I'm not getting anybody saying no. So can we take that forward then? Put that in the. If you're not clear about the minutes for that, Sarah, I mean, you and I and Helen can talk together about that just to make sure. And also Mike's suggestion. Yeah. Okay. Are we all right with that then? Thank you very much, Helen, for all your work on this. It's only just started, really, hasn't it? So much appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, we better move on. So we've now got, excuse me, sorry about this, just sorting my papers out. Now got item 7, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation UK Poverty Summary 2020-21 from John Golding. John, would you like to go through this report? You'll have all had a copy of this report with the papers, so I'm hoping that most of us have had a look at it. So thank you, John. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I won't go through it in detail. As you say, it's been printed on the agenda. I'll just highlight some of the key findings, if I may. So I think we've found in the past, I certainly find that the Joseph Rowntree Foundation publications are really helpful. Part of the panel's role is to monitor trends, look at research and good practice that's emerging. And so we've used Joseph Rowntree publications in the past, amongst others. In this particular report, there's some themes that have come forward. I suppose no great surprises. What Joseph Rowntree are recommending is that people have good jobs, that there's improvement in the earnings of low-income families, that there is a strengthening of the benefit system, and an increase in the amount of affordable, or they call it low-cost housing available. So all things that we kind of touched on during our debate today. Importantly, the report was produced during the pandemic, and so it does highlight the struggle that many households are facing, which has been, in some cases, compounded by the pandemic. As I say, probably no real surprises for us. We are seeing some of this stuff locally, and the work that Sharon and her team were talking about earlier, they see this day to day in some of the case work that we undertake. I think our poverty strategy picks up on the recommendations. So in terms of alignment, again, with what we're seeing nationally, I think our strategy covers all of those things. Surprising to see, but I'm always surprised when I see the headlines of over 14 million people are caught up in poverty. That's 1 in 5 of the population. It's a huge number for sort of 21st century. Never ceases to surprise me. But then that prevalence of poverty among part-time, low-paid workers, ethnic minorities, lone parent households, private renters, and areas of high unemployment, again, feature regularly in these reports. So the solutions are very much a national level to some of these things. There's social welfare changes required, somewhat out of our hands, but you mentioned lobbying earlier, Chair. What I think we're focusing on, which is the right thing to do, is to have an effective strategy that helps people locally. And then finally, if I might just refer to something that Andy Wood kindly alerted me to last week. In the Local Government Chronicle, there was an article by one of the directors at Joseph Rowntree Foundation. And if I may, I'll circulate this with the minutes of the meeting. But a lady called Helen Barnard, one of the directors, talked about how local authorities can make a real difference in terms of poverty work, and was really advocating for greater involvement. And 5 points that she highlighted, again, I think things that we picked up primarily, was about us encouraging income maximisation, providing local welfare assistance, which of course we do, reviewing our debt collection policies or practices, supporting local charities and community groups, and then the final point was a focus on renewal, not recovery. And again, I think we pretty much cover these in our poverty strategy. And if people are interested, I'll send my notes to Sarah so that she could circulate them with the minutes of a meeting, and you could see the Local Government Chronicle article in particular. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, John. One thing that's come up recently as well, added to the whole great long list of the rising cost of living, I heard on a radio programme last week about the government's proposal to limit benefits if people don't work a minimum number of hours a week, and that they have to start looking at jobs outside of their experience and knowledge. I don't know what the exact legislation is for this, but I was just quite appalled about that, as if people aren't under enough stress and worry as it is, without having to, there's a chance that they won't get the benefits they're entitled to if they don't jump through this particular hoop. And it's just another thing for people to be concerned about, really. So I've got Councillor Arnott again. Paul, thank you.
You seem to be so enjoying my contributions, Megan. I thought I'd come in again. Love Joseph Roundtree. Thank you for summarising that, John. I'll probably disappear off screen, as I just want to read one line that's on it there, which is, I'm terribly sorry. It will be there in just a second. Hang on a sec. This is what happens, isn't it, when you try and do this? It was the line in red on page 13 from the member of the Grassroots Poverty Action Group. And I just thought this was terribly timely when they say, I can summarise experiences of social security in 3 words: fear, fight, it feels like everything is a fight, and freeloader, we are made to feel like this. It's a very long time now that I'm 60 since I claimed any kind of benefit, but I did when I was aged 22, 23, had a bit of a financial disaster in the theatre, and I had to for a while. And, I've told this story before. I remember, my girlfriend's cat was eating better than I was at the time. I would quite often be looking forward to a bowl of rice with a squirt of tomato puree. It was a real fight to survive. It was a real fight back in those days. Supplementary benefit, it was called, I think, and housing benefit, just to get that to equal when you needed to pay your rent. So I really remember that. But I think a thing that's coming through now in a very divided society, and this has come from all of the nonsense post-Trump and post the debate around leaving Europe, is this shaming and othering of people who've got no other option but to seek support, quite rightfully, from the state. And I know there's nothing this committee can do to stop that, but it is horrendous to be, inadvertently at the bottom of the pile, so to speak, and to be accused of freeloading. That's just horrendous. And I think in all the communications that I see coming out of this council, I think we treat people in that predicament with enormous respect. And I'd like to congratulate all of our officers for the tone in which they set around this. It's really important. And indeed you, Chair, the respect you show to people in these positions. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for that. Yeah, agree with all of that. Councillor Allen, Mike, thank you.
Yeah, I remember living in Paperbag in Middle of Road. I too used to be in poverty, and in fact, I know how it feels, and I have every sympathy with people who feel the shame of walking into a job centre and feeling that that's a pretty hopeless situation and that are being judged. It's fundamentally wrong to feel like that, but that's the way you feel. You feel guilty about it. It would help perhaps if we in our area did all we could to make sure that that doesn't happen when meeting our particular residents. And I don't really believe our officers ever do that kind of thing. All the feedback I get is that our officers handle it really well and positively. And that's why the financial counselling approach that we've had is really brilliant. If we look at our debt collection procedures and make sure that they're properly handled, as I'm sure they are, then we should be above board in terms of how we look at people in poverty. We want to help. We don't want to condemn them. And the whole ethos of this particular forum has been all along that there is nobody should be condemned for being in poverty. And I totally in agreement with Paul Arnott on this. And we should continue to encourage the right agenda in terms of helping people out of poverty. But one of the biggest difficulties is when people are disabled and unable to work, and they need the maximum local voluntary support. And that is something that maybe we could consider looking at. But I just want to say that I, like John Golding, really admire Joseph Rowntree's work. I follow it continuously. And there are a couple of other think tanks that I follow on the subject. I'm delighted that we have such information coming in locally. The Local Government Association has now made it very much easier to interrogate the data that's going to be coming out of the census, the recent census, so that we can get a better grip by pressing a button. Once they feed the information into this system, we'll be hopefully having less effort by our officers and more transparency in terms of what the real problems are. So sorry if I'm rambled on a bit, but I just think this forum is such a good and across the board support forum between officers and all shades of councillor opinion. Thank you, Megan, for pushing it forward.
Thank you for that, Mike. Thanks. It's not just me. It's all of us. You know, that's what I say. But thank you, and thank you, John, for bringing this report to our attention. They do it every year, don't they? The Joseph Rowntree Foundation. So it's always good to have an update. But it's also good, not that we're resting on our laurels at all, but it's good to know that we're pretty much in alignment with what they're saying. And it's just the frustration of knowing what to do about it all. But I think we're, we've got a good start, we've got a good strategy, and we're all pulling in the same direction. That's the main thing. So thank you for that. Did you, John, earlier say you wanted to mention any more about the District Council network, or have we covered that already?
I think it's been covered, Chair.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Right. Well, thanks for that, John. And we'll move on to the last item, the forward plan, item 8. I just wanted to explain about this.
Sorry, Megan, I did have my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm really sorry, Marianne. I didn't see that. Oh,
that's okay.
Sorry,
I was just coming back to comment about the need to increase the amount of low-cost housing. And I just thought it was interesting that I just Googled rents in Europe, and you'll be absolutely horrified to find that the UK, according to this, is €5,846. And the next lowest is Switzerland, then France, then Finland. And we are double the majority of other countries in terms of average rents. It is horrendous. No wonder people are poor.
Mm.
What can we do about this? Can we lobby and ask for rent control or something?
Yeah, what can we do? What can we do about that? Lobbying again? I'm not sure. I don't know whether Joe's got any answer. Don't want to put you on the spot.
No, absolutely. I think it's a market forces issue, isn't it? You know, it's certainly not something that we're going to sort out here. But yeah, I think it's a market sources issue. Also, in this country, we have this kind of flawed thinking that everyone should own their own home, so tries to push people out of rented as quickly as possible, whereas in Europe they have the exact opposite. There are incentives for people who rent. I have friends who live in Denmark and stuff, and there is absolutely no incentive for anybody to buy a home. So therefore rents are kept to a sensible level. But I'd have to say also their rental market is somewhat different to ours in that most rental agreements, certainly my friends in Denmark, they have a full repairing rental on theirs. So if anything goes wrong with the property, they have to pay for it, not the landlord. So I think that also will help to bring the prices down. So yeah, but it is an interesting topic.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jo. Yeah. Thanks, Marianne, for raising these issues. I can't see anybody else wanting to speak. So are we all right to move on to item 8? Thank you. Forward plan. So I've included this item on the agenda for us to firstly decide whether the panel should have a forward plan, and if so, for us to discuss and decide how to facilitate ways in which we can best monitor progress of the Poverty Strategy Action Plan, bearing in mind what we've discussed earlier about Helen's report. For example, how best to report back on the various service updates. Also, I understand that the proposed poverty dashboard is likely to be presented to the panel by Libby's team at our March meeting. I've got a few ideas myself about what could go on the forward plan, but I'd like to just open up discussion on, first of all, whether we think it's a good idea to have a forward plan. And then if anyone has any comments, I'll try and go through the official channel of taking any comments from outside of the panel, first of all. So can I just ask the panel whether they think it's a good idea to have a forward plan, first of all? Has anybody got any objections to that? Let's put it that way. No comments must mean assent. Oh, Councillor Chapman, Maddie.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think it's a brilliant idea to have a forward plan and to monitor what is going on. I would also like to ask, Chair, I have not heard anyway of any new allotments coming forward in East Devon. I know in Exmouth we have a couple of large allotments and there's always a waiting list. And we've got such a wonderful countryside team. And East Devon have lots of bits of land here and there. I'm just wondering whether it would help some families if they had someone to show them how to do things, whether we could bring allotments forward. That would help. It would give them something to do. It would be a sense of community, and they could grow their own food and help each other out. I don't know what anyone else thinks. I know my granddad was a great one for allotments, and he had 3, and he had one in the middle of Efford in Plymouth, if anyone knows it, right in amongst all the bungalows there. And every Sunday morning he would go out and cut vegetables and hand all vegetables out to the local community, and the local community used to police his allotments for him. And so they always had fresh vegetables and everything for lunch. And it was a brilliant sense of community. I mean, that's what I was brought up with. We don't seem to hear anything about it these days, and I don't know what the waiting list across East Devon is for allotments. And a lot of young families I know would probably enjoy it, but they can't get an allotment because there's a shortage. Don't know what you think, Chair.
Well, as usual, Maddie, I totally agree with you. I've thought this for quite a while about allotments and the need for them. It's going back as much as anything to this idea of the community involvement, isn't it? The community infrastructure and so on that you talked about earlier. So yes, I'd certainly agree. I don't know whether, John, would you have any idea? Can we find out about any sort of land for allotments, new allotments, and the waiting list and so on, and all that side of things? Thanks.
Yeah, we have some information. I think some of the town and parishes we would need to talk to as well. In terms of housing land, we are going through a process of looking at that, but with a view to building on it in terms of our what we were just discussing about affordable housing, rather than turning it over for allotment land. And we don't see a lot of new allotments coming forward. Again, that might be a discussion that we might need to have with our planning colleagues as well. But we can put that on, if you agree to a forward plan, put that on the forward plan and have a think about that, perhaps scope it out as to what we might, what data we might be able to gather, and what the options are for bringing forward more land for that purpose.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. It's a two-edged sword, isn't it? We need land. We just haven't got enough land, basically, do we? We need land for houses, land for allotments, land for community centres, land for football pitches, you know, all of the community stuff. But yeah, that'd be good, I think, if other people agree. I'm just wondering, do you mind if Joe, did you want to come in next? Sorry, I know I'm jumping down the list a bit, but I just wondered if you wanted to comment on that before I move to members. Thank you. I think you're on mute.
Sorry, rookie mistake, wasn't it? Chitter-chattering away. No, we've recently done some work with our tenant participation panels, etc., and with Ian Williams. And this won't help necessarily the allotment idea, which I'm also a huge fan of, I'd have to say. But actually quite a lot of our tenant panels are requesting community gardens be included within their estates. So we've already got one that's been done on the Millway estate, plus also an orchard, which has also been planted with various fruit trees. So that may well be a way forward. And also, I think, you know, if we are moving into developing our own social housing, as you know, we're hoping to do, then this may well actually come into the overall scoping out of any developments that we do, would be perhaps to put in community gardens, stuff like that. Another thing that I think we ought to consider doing, which I know that Libby is a huge supporter of, is if we're going to be building our own housing stock, I think we need to be putting in high-speed cable into all of our properties, because that's another thing that a lot of our tenants really struggle with, is the cost of getting high-speed broadband into their homes. So if we've got the ground dug up to build, then actually it makes sense to put those cables through to reduce the digital exclusion that some of our estates struggle with. So anyway, yeah, so tenants are quite clearly now asking for community gardens, etc.
Yeah.
We can facilitate.
Oh, good. That's good. Thank you very much. Lovely. Yeah. Bruce, Councillor Desarum, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was going to say that I agree with the principle of having a forward plan. And I think that in March, it will be very interesting to hear what the Poverty Dashboard reports back to us, the updated version. And I think it's in keeping with our Joseph Rowntree Foundations that we just touched on earlier on page 8 of the report, what the recommendations were. I think that's something that we can incorporate into our forward plan. Obviously, Joseph Rowntree talked on national lines, but we could unpick some of their main bullet points and see how we relate to them as a forward plan, because that way we'll know we're on the right track and making good progress, which I think we all want to make out of this panel. So that was my idea. Thoughts, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruce. I've realised I've gone off the agenda here because I should be taking speakers from outside the panel, but it's getting to the end of the meeting, and I think I'll just go through the speakers as they've turned up. if you don't mind. Mike, Councillor Allen, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong, Chair. Yeah, first of all, yes, we haven't, I don't think, finished our usefulness and value as a forum. The dashboard is one key aspect. We've talked about the whole area of housing and planning is another area. I think Paul Arnott mentioned the economic aspects. We haven't really had anybody present on those since the original presentation that started the forum. The one thing that struck me, the Financial Conduct Authority did a big survey in 2017, and I know it's 5 years ago, but at that time, 55% of the East Devon population said that they had a low level of financial knowledge. Now, if we think about that, it might be useful sometime to consider how we might help people with their financial planning as a council. It's way beyond our norm, but if at the end of the day, people don't invest in things like pensions, savings and so on, with what little they might have, then we're going to continually have to pick up the pieces afterwards. Just to give you a laugh, I was going down the road and my car went bang. And unfortunately, it was a terminal repair needed. And so I suddenly have had to use most of my savings to get a new car. If I hadn't done any financial planning, I would now be walking everywhere. And everybody might say, well, that's a good idea, you're too fat anyway. But it might be useful if we considered how we might maybe have some kind of a grant for somebody to put together a little program on financial counselling that was totally impartial and not trying to push one particular line. You never know, a leaflet, a booklet, something like that might be something that we could offer, and it might help people. Thank you ever so much. I get the impression that Eleanor is laughing her head off about something, so I'll turn over to her.
No, just before we go to Eleanor, can I just say something? And I agree. I really agree with this idea of giving people some knowledge about financial planning. But just a little note from me from a long time ago was when I was on I was a single parent with two young children. And I was in a relatively low-paid job soon after I moved down here, and the national organisation, the national charity that I worked for, offered a really good pension, but I couldn't afford it.
No.
I just couldn't afford it, and that's the problem. I was in poverty myself, and I was really struggling at that time. So that's the other side of the coin, isn't it? We can give all this financial advice and so on, but if people can't afford to pay into a pension, for example, that's, what do you do about that? But I agree that it would be good to be able to offer something like that if we could possibly do it. Yeah, thank you for that, Mike. So Eleanor, yes, I'll let you come in now, thanks.
Thank you, Chad. So I just wanted to say, sorry, I wasn't laughing at anything you said, Mike, sorry, that was a mistake. I was laughing at something else. It was about allotments and the delivery of allotments. Now, I was wondering whether, instead of discussing allotments and that kind of service ourselves, we could actually make representations to the local plan delivery group and make sure that that's included, and also a delivery mechanism that is different from what's happening at the moment is included within the local plan. Because my experience of what's been happening with the delivery of allotments in particular on the back of new housing is that they're either delivered very, very late or very badly or not at all, or the land that's delivered is land that's been used to store plant machinery after having had all the topsoil scraped off it. And so they're almost handed over as an afterthought, as a bit of land that the developers can't really think what to do with, because either it's unbuildable on or they've ruined it by putting bulldozers all over it and scraping off the topsoil. So I'm just wondering whether through the local plan we couldn't better actually force the delivery of allotments. I mean, I think it's not too strong a word, force them to be delivered in a timely fashion and actually in a fit state, because some of the allotments that have been delivered on the back of some of the new housing at this end of the district is just appalling. I think that's not too strong a word for it, really. So they're handing over patches of land that are essentially subsoil, which is heavily compacted and full of builders' rubble. And that's just not satisfactory at all. That's not going to make for satisfactory gardening experiences for people. As I said in the chat, at Westcliff, we're still waiting on the delivery of the allotments. So they're still sitting there. They've been marked out. They've now been covered in weeds for 3.5, 4 years, and they're still not delivered. They're still not open for business. And just why? People could have been growing stuff on them 3 years ago. So I think they are in the gift of the developer, and I just think that the mechanism that we have at the moment for delivering them is just wrong. It's not working. I mean, maybe need to tackle that through the local plan in future. Thank you. Sorry, it's my observation.
Thanks for that, Eleanor. Yeah, good idea. It's appalling, actually, when you think about it. Yes, because a lot of the new houses, they're just as you say, they're built on rubble, aren't they? The gardens, even the lawns, you just dig down a few inches down into the lawn, and it's just rubble, so that you just can't grow things on them. Yeah, I agree. Thank you. So, Peter Faithful, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to allotments, my understanding is it's one of the responsibilities of town and parish councils. So maybe that's something we should be discussing with them about as well, not just within ourselves.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Peter. Yeah, good. Anybody else wanting to speak on this item? I'll just whip through some of the ideas we've got. So we've got allotments. What else have we got? The poverty dashboard in March, hopefully. I did wonder about whether you wanted any external speakers to come in. I'm thinking particularly about the fuel poverty issue we've got at the moment, and whether we wanted, for example, Exeter Community Energy to come and speak to us, if they were willing to do that, or any other speakers. I wondered whether we could get Simon Kitchen from Devon County Council to come in again and update us on the Team Devon issues that we discussed back in, I think it was September. And Andy Wood, I spoke to Andy last week because I'd heard something again on the radio about the heat networks. And heat networks aren't covered for, they're quite separate. The recipients of heat networks, the customers, don't have the same rights as a normal energy company would have. And so there's some concern about that. And I was asking Andy just to clarify that actually, for example, Cranbrook is a heat network. And he sent me a link actually to say that Ofgem are going to be taking over that, the heat networks and control them. So that's something else that he said he'd be more than happy to come and speak to us about, and how we can tackle poverty through the investments, our own investments. So whether that's something that you'd be interested in. Is there anybody else who would like to add anything to the list? Because what I was going to suggest was that if there's nothing else, you can always write in, or email or whatever to Sarah or myself, just if they've got any other ideas as to what you'd like on the forward plan. And then we'll we'll make a note of them and we'll draw up a forward plan for us to consider at the next meeting, if that's all right with everybody. Oh, Mike, I see you've got your hand up again. Thank you.
Yeah, it was only to mention DWP as another potential speaker.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, because we did have them a while back, didn't we? Yeah. Okay. Is there any other burning issues that you think you would like to have on the forward plan before we end this item? Because I realise we've gone over time now.
Chair, I think we should pick up on the discussion we had earlier around perhaps carefully inviting our planning colleagues.
Yes.
They can just tell us how they can contribute towards the poverty strategy and perhaps pick up some of the allotment stuff.
Yes.
Planning policy in relation to that. And I think Councillor Allen mentioned earlier, might be useful for us to just have a look at the Local Government Association publications. I think they call them Insight or something similar. That might be useful alongside any other relevant research that's published. We can keep an eye out for that.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Oh, thank you. Yes, I'm sorry. I've forgotten about the planning, inviting the planning department. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Nothing else from anybody? Well, if we draw up a list and perhaps send it round before the next meeting, that might be an idea for people to comment on, I think. So thank you very much to everybody for your comments on that. So the last item is the date of the next meeting. So at the September 21 meeting, it was agreed that the panel continues to meet every 2 months during 2022 in order to receive any updates from officers and external organisations and to monitor progress of the Poverty Strategy Action Plan. The following dates up to May this year have been agreed as 21st of March and 23rd of May, but unfortunately, I will now be unable to attend on the 23rd of May, for which I apologise. So I would like to suggest it will have to be a provisional date because obviously that comes after the annual meeting. So I just wondered whether people could be available the following Monday, the 30th of May, rather than the 23rd of May. Again, this is provisional, but I think it's just so that we can have a date in mind. Is everybody saying that's all right? Officers as well? Has anybody got any objection to that? I don't think it's a bank holiday, because I think later that week we've got 2 days, haven't we, for the Queen's Jubilee, 70 years, yeah. So is that all right, 30th of May, provisionally? So the further dates for the rest of 22 will be arranged following the annual council meeting. And also please note that the meetings start at 10 o'clock. I'm assuming that that's all right for everybody. Okay, so anything else anybody wants to say? Final chance. No? You all want to go home? Well, you are home, most of you. Have a cup of tea and the lunch. So that brings our meeting to a close. Thank you ever so much to everybody for participating, including any members of the public watching online. Can I remind all of us that present that the supporting officer will confirm when the meeting is no longer recorded or going live, and until then your comments will be live to the public. Thank you ever so much to all of you for bearing with us. I thought it was going to be a short meeting today, but we've had a good old discussion, so that's great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Megan. Okay.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you, Megan.
Okay, thank you.